Okay, welcome to Indicator 3.2, where we just finished up 3.1, talking about the start of the war at Fort Sumter. We talked about how the nation became divided. We discussed some of the compromises and things that were led up to the beginning of the war. Now we're going to look at some of the things that are going to happen during the war. And 3.2 is about those events. We're going to start with looking at the advantages and disadvantages of both North and South as this war begins to crank up. In the North, we're going to have their advantages are going to be, of course, they've got a lot of industry, they've got factories, they've got railroads, they've got a huge population, which means they're going to have more manpower. They've got a navy. And of course, Lincoln was really good at unifying the people and getting them behind him. Some of the disadvantages for the North was that they're going to be fighting on foreign land. A lot of them have not traveled very far from their homeland, and of course, and from their farms and things. And so they're going to travel to a foreign place, a place that they're not familiar with. And they're also going to struggle trying to find military leaders. It seems like most of the generals and some of the better ones, especially in the beginning of the war, are going to side with the South. Guys like Robert E. Lee and Stonewall Jackson. Those guys had military experience. They had fought in the Mexican American War, so they were pretty familiar with military tactics, and the North is going to struggle in the beginning. As far as the South goes, the advantages is going to be King Cotton, but it's also going to be a disadvantage too because they relied so much on the trade of cotton and making that money from the sale of cotton. But cotton would be an advantage in the beginning. They have a close economic relationship with Great Britain. They sold a lot of cotton to Great Britain early on. Great Britain provided them with goods and ships early on as well. The other advantage is that the North is going to invade the South, so the South has the home field advantage. They're familiar with their surroundings, they're familiar with their territory. They know their woods and their swamps, whereas the Northern troops are not going to have that advantage. And again, like we said earlier, that the South had better military leaders. Guys like Robert E. Lee, Stonewall Jackson, and others are going to play huge roles for the South and for the Confederacy. The disadvantages would have been their president, Jefferson Davis. Jefferson Davis had a hard time trying to create unity because most of these states that were seceding are states that are breaking away. They're breaking away because they want to do their own thing. So the idea of states' rights is going to be hard to create unity because they want to do their own thing. Again, the South has a smaller population, and the South really doesn't have a lot of industry. Remember, the South is mainly focused on agriculture and especially on the growing of cotton. Make sure that you fill in your chart on your note sheet and you write down these advantages and disadvantages for North and South. As far as the strategies are going to go, once the war gets rolling, the North strategy is going to be something called the Anaconda Plan. And of course, Anaconda is a huge snake. If you look at that map, this is Winfield Scott. He came up with this idea that they needed to surround the South and strangle them to death like an anaconda. And one of the ways they were going to do that was they needed to take control of the Mississippi River because they knew the Mississippi was like a highway for the South. It provided them a way of moving goods and soldiers and all sorts of things. So, again, if they could control the Mississippi, then they could control that major highway for the South. The other thing was that they were going to blockade the southern ports. We just said that the North had a strong navy. They knew that if they surrounded the South with ships and kept things from coming in and going out, that this would weaken the South economically, and they couldn't get the reinforcements and the things that they needed to continue fighting. So the Anaconda Plan was the North strategy. The South strategy was to gain support from Great Britain, hoping that Great Britain would provide some of the things that they needed to keep fighting, and they were going to defend their region until the support from Great Britain or from another European power might show up, or hopefully that the North would give up in the meantime and just realize, hey, we just got to let the South go. But of course, that did not happen. So these were the two strategies for both sides. Again, make sure that you put them down on your sheets. And let's look at a couple of influential battles and events of the war. Civil War battles, there's going to be many of them. These are the main ones that you're going to need to know. There's a chart there on your note sheet that you need to fill out. And let's look again at the first battle, being the Battle of Fort Sumter in South Carolina in Charleston. It occurs in April of 1861. It is a Confederate victory. The significance of that battle, although no one was killed, was that battle was the first shots of the Civil War. So you definitely want to get that down. The first sort of land battle or major battle is going to be the Battle of Bull Run, which happens in Manassas, Virginia. In some cases, they call it the Battle of Manassas. The Confederates refer to it as Manassas because it's the closest town. The Union refers to it as Bull Run because it was the closest creek. But anyway, that battle takes place in 1861. It was the first major battle. It was a Confederate victory. The significance of that battle was that the Confederacy believed that once they punched the North in the nose really good, that the North would just simply give up and would just let the Confederacy go or let the South go. But they did not. And it also showed for the first time that this war was going to be long and bloody. People came to watch that battle in carriages and with picnic baskets, thinking it was going to be something that was just going to be entertainment. And when they saw the blood and the gore that happened in that battle, they're going to realize that, hey, this isn't what they thought this war was going to be like at all. Another really bloody, gory battle was the Battle of Antietam in Maryland. That happens in 1862. Many consider that battle to be a draw. It's considered to be one of the bloodiest single days of fighting in American history. 26,000 men would die in the Battle of Antietam. So really pretty significant loss of life in one major battle, and in one day, 26,000 people dying. So pretty huge battle. Around 1863, we get the announcement of the Emancipation Proclamation. And this happens on January the 1st, 1863. Abraham Lincoln is going to issue this. And make sure you understand what it actually was. It stated that all slaves in rebellious states could be free. So that didn't mean the territories or anything like that. It just meant the states that were fighting against the North, that was fighting against the Union. Again, the Emancipation Proclamation, the political goal was to get Great Britain to stop their aid to the South. Great Britain was morally opposed to slavery. In fact, they'd already abolished slavery. We talked about that in 1807, 1808. Slavery was abolished in Great Britain. So they're trying to get Great Britain to quit aiding the South and eventually come to the side of the North. The outcome was that it really did not free any slaves at that time, even though saying these slaves are free in these rebellious territories or rebellious states. But it does play a major role in trying to convince people to join the fight and try to put an end to this war. So it does have some sort of an impact, but it's still going to be another 2 years before this war would end. The Emancipation Proclamation, didn't get rid of slavery in the border states, so it still allowed slavery to exist in the border states and even in some of the areas that had it out west. So it wasn't a complete ending of slavery. It was basically just saying that the slaves were free in the states that were fighting against the Union, so basically the states in the South. The turning point of the Civil War is going to be the Battle of Gettysburg. That occurs on July 1st through the 3rd, 1863. Again, huge battle. The South decides to take the fight to the North. They're going to move out of Virginia and eventually into Pittsburgh or into Pennsylvania, excuse me. And this is going to be a way to maybe hopefully bring the war to the North, which most of the fighting, for the most part, have been done in the South. Now the Southern Army has decided to move into the North, show the North what this war was about, and hopefully deliver a decisive blow that might put an end to the North wanting to keep the Union together. This was the last Confederate invasion into the North. It is considered to be the turning point, and of course, the North is going to win that battle. So, and there's a couple of movies out there if you haven't seen them about Gettysburg. Pretty good show on the History Channel too about Gettysburg. But again, turning point of the war changes everything. From there on in, the South doesn't try to invade the North, and really the South is sort of on its heels after the Battle of Gettysburg. Right about the same time that Gettysburg is going on is another major battle, which is the Battle of Vicksburg, which is in Mississippi. This occurs on July 4th, 1863. Remember, we discussed the Anaconda Plan and how controlling the Mississippi River would help in the South's ability to be able to move supplies and soldiers and those agricultural products up and down the river. And if they could control that, they could weaken the South economically. Ulysses S. Grant is going to gain control of the Mississippi River when he wins at the Battle of Vicksburg, and this is pretty much going to cut off all Southern trade. And remember, they have the blockade all around the South to keep ships from going in and out. So the South is really struggling by the time this battle happens. And losing the Mississippi River and the North winning at Vicksburg is going to deal a huge blow to the South, especially to their economy. Lincoln is going to issue his Gettysburg Address on November of 1863. Again, the speech that starts off with the 7 years ago, our founding fathers and so on. But anyway, that speech by Lincoln is going to be done after the Battle of Gettysburg. It's going to encourage the North to keep fighting. They need to fight and be able to preserve the Union. So Gettysburg Address plays a major role. The significance, again, encourage the North to keep fighting to preserve the Union. Next major battle is the Battle of Atlanta in 1864. Again, the North is trying to put a stranglehold on the South to weaken them economically, to crush all their ability to be able to fight and to move goods and soldiers and supplies. And Atlanta was a major railroad hub coming down from Chattanooga, Tennessee, after the North had taken control of the Mississippi River. They're going to march into Atlanta. They're going to burn and destroy most of Atlanta. They're going to take the railroads and they're going to tear them to pieces. In fact, Sherman, who's going to be leading this march, is going to take those railroad rails up and he's going to set them on fire. And then he's going to take them and twist them, and they're going to refer to those things as Sherman's knot. But again, destroyed all those railroads to hurt the South economically. After Atlanta's been taken, Sherman is going to make his march to the sea, leaving from Atlanta and then going to Savannah. Along the way, he's going to destroy cities, farms, railroads, crops, and livestock. He's going to pretty much issue what we would call total war or scorched earth, where he's pretty much destroying everything to make the South come to its knees. Again, another good map showing you the Union states and border states and southern states, and showing you where some of those battles were. The final blow for South Carolina occurs when Sherman marches into South Carolina and eventually to Columbia. If you've ever been to the State House, you can see there's stars on the side of the State House walls where Sherman's cannonballs actually struck the State House. Columbia was burned, and of course, from there on in, Sherman's going to start his march into North Carolina, and eventually hooks up with Grant at Appomattox. Again, showing you those states, Confederate states, on northern states, and showing you the election of 1864. Of course, Lincoln would win re-election in 1864, and now Lincoln is ready to end this war. Lincoln settles in with Grant as his head general, and that's going to be a wise move because Grant would bring Lincoln victory. Sherman would also march up from the South. They would link up, surrounding Lee pretty much, and eventually forcing his surrender on April the 9th, 1865. One of the things is that Lincoln realized that to punish the South harshly might not be a good idea. And so he wanted the South to sort of just come back in and join the Union without a lot of harsh punishment. But unfortunately for Abraham Lincoln, an assassin's bullet would kill him 5 days later when a guy named John Wilkes Booth, a former actor, is going to assassinate Lincoln in Washington, D.C. at Ford's Theater. The impact of this war, it did preserve the Union. That's the main thing. And it liberated the slaves who had been in slavery mainly in the South, and that's going to play a huge role. And then the idea of states' rights are still going to be kept alive, even though this war is over with. Some states are still going to resist the federal government's push, and we're still going to see some of these things going on even after this war is over with. Okay, that's going to finish this up for 3-2. Again, make sure that you filled out your sheet. You've got everything filled in. You know these different battles. You know the significance of all the things that are going to happen. You know who's involved. You know the advantages and disadvantages of the North and the South, and you know their strategies. So please make sure you go over that. There will be questions that will accompany this, either on the board or on a sheet for you to answer to go along with these notes. And this will count for grade. So please make sure you get it done. And I will catch you guys on the next one.